All right, well, welcome to this episode of Small Biz Buzz. I'm Scott Martineau.
And I'm Crystal Huft. I got it.
And today, you did. That was great.
Thank you.
Today we have an awesome guest, Jeremy Ryan Slate, who's the founder of Create Your Own Life podcast with us today. Jeremy, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I feel like this is the most people I've had on a Zoom call for an interview. This is awesome.
I know, we roll deep.
Well, we bring out all the guns for you.
That's right.
I brought them too.
There we go.
I wish I had those guns.
Yes, for our listeners, you couldn't see, but Jeremy did just flash his guns.
Oh, thank you.
Immediately made me feel intimidated. So with that setup, welcome, Jeremy. I think the first thing I'd love to just have you give our guests a brief snapshot. Who are you? Tell us about your podcast, and we're going to poke in questions, but just give us the quick summary of who you are and what you're about.
Sure. I'm a husband. I'm a father of just about 2 years now to a very rambunctious child who is amazing. I have
Sweet.
2 dogs, a Border Collie Corgi mix, a toy poodle, and I also have a pet pig named Remington. We love animals in this house.
Oh, so cute.
I also have a podcast called Create Your Own Life where I interview world-class performers.
So the pig, let's just pause. Sorry.
No worries.
Because you went there. So where does the pig live?
Sorry, I got a coffee grind in my mouth. He used to live in our house. Then he has a little bit of a bladder problem. So we built a house for him outside. We fenced in the whole backyard. And he kind of goes out there all day, like digging stuff up and kind of doing whatever he wants to do.
So cute.
That is fantastic.
Yeah,
okay.
he lives a very good life, man.
It sounds like it. Great. All right, continue.
Yeah. So I also have a podcast called Create Your Own Life where we're over a couple million downloads now. And, almost 800 episodes, and I get to interview like people that are world-class and just really remarkable. I'm really interested in very, very interesting and different people and, their life experience. We also have a PR agency called Command Your Brand, where we help people appear on top-rated podcasts as guests. And I don't know, man, I feel like I've done a lot of things in a very short period of life. I'm also a former competitive powerlifter.
Okay. So that helps us understand the gun.
Yeah.
I don't feel as intimidated. Well, I do. I feel equally intimidated. I don't feel as bad about myself.
It actually makes me feel
so-
really bad about the fact that I've got absolutely nothing planned this weekend. I'm like feeling behind in life after hearing Jeremy talk, but then also I'm like, I've got no plans to improve that this weekend.
Well, I've been going nuts this whole like quarantine time with our gyms being closed. Oh my gosh, it's insane.
Well, you do have a pig, so I don't know what that probably doesn't cover your weight limits, weight requirements there, but
he's only 75 pounds. I need a lot more than that.
Oh, he's a small. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
He's a mini pig.
Right. So I want a little more context on Create Your Own Life podcast. So millions of downloads, hundreds of episodes. Take us back all the way to the beginning. What sparked this?
So I have my master's degree in early Roman Empire propaganda, not a very applicable skill in the world of getting jobs. So when I got out of school, I taught high school.
Great for podcasting, though.
Oh, it's amazing for podcasting. I have some really cool conversations. Like I had Dan Carlin from Hardcore History on, and we went like total nerd. It was great. But like when I got out of school, like in New Jersey, if you want to teach, you have to have a teaching degree. And since I didn't have that, I ended up teaching in private school where you don't really need that. So I did that for a couple years, and my mom ended up having a really bad stroke in 2012, and it kind of like set me on a little bit of a spin trying to find out what was going to work for me. So I quit my job on a whim because I had seen this network marketing presentation, and I didn't know what that was. So I saw this presentation. I was like, dude, I'm going to be like a multimillionaire tomorrow. Sign me up. So it didn't go like that, but it was kind of the first thing that got me started. And I went from there to selling life insurance, which I was pretty good at, but I hated feeling like a bad mob boss being like, so you love your family, right? You should buy this. And so I did that for a little bit. Then I went from there to selling products on Amazon, and I left the get my product for just $1 promo code on my listing. So I lost all of my stuff to one address in Maryland in about 20 minutes. And I was kind of like, all right, so I failed at a bunch of things. This didn't really work. And I taught myself how to code websites from reading a bunch of blogs and watching YouTube videos. So I worked at a friend's marketing firm for a little bit. And in that time, I actually was like, okay, well, what am I going to do for myself? And back in college, in like 2007, I had been introduced to podcasts by a professor of mine. And it was always something I liked listening to, but I didn't really know, like, how do you start one? So after kind of all these failures, I started this podcast, and it was absolute crap. It was horrible, but I at least got started, and I quit after about 60 days, and I had like 100 downloads. And in 2015, I feel like this is a really long story. In 2015, I lived in Peru for about a month, and it kind of got me out of my space and all that kind of stuff. And it made me realize, like, okay, so where are you going with this? You know, you're getting married in a few months. You failed at a bunch of different things, and you're kind of just working part-time for your friend. Like, what are you going to do? And I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to take this podcasting thing seriously, I'm going to go out, I'm going to take a course, I'm going to figure out how it works, and I'm going to treat this as a professional. So... You know, the idea of Create Your Own Life came from a conversation I had with my dad right after I quit my teaching job, because he's like, you are crazy. And I'm like, well, I'm going to create my own life. And he's like, good luck with that, buddy. And it was kind of, you know, the first place of where that started. Yeah. And the show took off, man. We had 10,000 listens in our first 30 days. And that was, you know, all the way back in 2015. And it's just been, you know, rolling ever since.
That's awesome. I feel like fantastic. A lot of entrepreneurs can say they failed multiple times. I think that's why when they get going, they're so passionate about it, because they understand what it is to not be successful at that. Yeah. But it's great to see where you've come. And one of the things I was interested when I was reading up on you was it said you had interviewed over 500 entrepreneurs. So one of the things I'm really curious about is what are some of the lessons you've learned by interviewing all these different entrepreneurs of all different kinds of businesses? Like, what are your takeaways from interviewing that many entrepreneurs?
Yeah, well, I want to add to the first thing you said there first, because that's really, really important point, is you said, like, you know, you failed at all these things. And I think, like, people don't give themselves enough chances to fail, because you have to fail at some things before you find the right thing. I was talking to Kevin Harrington yesterday, who's the guy that created the infomercial, like, back in the 80s. And he said, you know, I was on stage one day and I said, you know, who do you think's failed the most in this room? And he raised his hand. He goes, because I failed more times than all of you, because I've tried more times than all of you. So I just wanted to just point that out. That's just really, really important for your audience. But in terms of, like, what I've learned from guests, like, and this comes from my personal story as well, a lot of people I learned from, like, adversity is your best teacher. Like, the fact that you are in a kind of crappy situation is a really important way to grow, because it's going to show you who you really are and cause you to go so far out of your comfort zone that you don't really, I guess, care about what can happen to you anymore. Because I think a lot of times we're afraid of, like, oh, if I pick up the phone, like, you know, somebody may not answer it or be mad at me or whatever it is. And it's like, that's such a little thing. But once you get pushed to this point of adversity, it's pretty intense. Like, I've had Bedros Keuilian on my show, who's a guy that started a large franchise called Fit Body Boot Camp. And they came to America from Armenia, and he was eating out of garbage cans in high school to, like, make things work. Or, like, Grant Cardone, when he was 25, was in drug rehab, and somebody told him he'd never amount to anything. So I think adversity is a huge, huge, huge thing. And if you use it the right way, it can actually be a gift, because it can something that can actually help you get over yourself. So that's kind of one thing.
I'm curious. Yeah. I'm curious. Kind of taking the last 2 points just down a little bit deeper. So, can you think of a guest on your podcast where maybe you were most surprised about the adversity or the failure? You know, maybe on the surface you looked and said, it looks like they had it from the get-go, you know, but where were you most surprised?
You know, I don't know if it was somebody that had it from the get-go, but it was somebody that, like, I guess the public story people see is not what actually happened. Mm-hmm. So I had, do you guys remember the Dos Equis commercials years ago with the most interesting man in the world?
Yeah, so
I interviewed him about 3 weeks ago, Jonathan Goldsmith. And he's telling me this story about he was in like 300 different TV shows and stuff like that back in the 60s, and he just kind of didn't make it. And he's like, you know, so he left Hollywood. And I was like, wow, so you didn't really make it till later in life? And he goes, no, dude, I left and I went and became a millionaire in network marketing. And I just, you know, people just don't really talk about that part of his story. So I think it's really interesting that what the perceived success is publicly isn't always what success is to people, and it's also not the stories people pick up, because sometimes they don't sell as well. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think it's really important to have an open mind when you look at a lot of people's stories.
Totally.
Yeah, fascinating.
Geez, he really sounds like the most interesting man in the world now that I know this backstory.
he is, though, because like he's like he told me, like, I've lied so many times to get parts in movies, because like you just agree to things. And then, you know, like, you'll figure out how to do it later on. They're like, hey, can you ride a horse? He's like, well, of course I can. Like the wind. Though he grew up in Brooklyn, and he'd never seen a horse before. And the horse almost killed him once he got on it. And the director's like the wind, huh? So, like, but I think that's also a great point to people I've interviewed is, you know, sometimes you got to make things go right. Now, that doesn't mean that you lie about your stats or whatever it is you've achieved or whatever it may be. But sometimes you have to agree to things and figure it out later. And I think that's really important as well, because, you're going to challenge yourself to go far, far, far outside of your comfort zone. And sure, I've said I could make some things happen that stress me the heck out, but then you figure out how to do it. And is the first version pretty? Absolutely not. But like, it gets you out there.
That is cool.
All right, great. So we got adversity was kind of one meta theme. What else are you seeing?
So the other thing too, I see this like, I think a really great example of this is I had the founder of Priceline.com on, Jeff Hoffman, and co-founder of Priceline.com. And he said that, like for him, once he realized how to build a big business was once he stopped thinking it was all about himself. And I think with a lot of entrepreneurs, like once you flip to this viewpoint of like, it's the food in my mouth and in my belly and, me like being able to live, to like realizing like there's all these other people you can help and grow and these things you can achieve, like your success kind of grows exponentially from there. And I've just seen it again and again and again from a lot of the different people I've talked to. They kind of flip from this mindset of me to we, and they're like more successful than they could ever imagine because, it's not just about themselves and putting food in their own stomach. It becomes about mission, and it becomes about a lot of these other things, and actually making money becomes a lot easier. And I've seen this in my own life. Like, really like when you move from, sustaining and making things work to impact, you actually do, change a lot of things for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So true.
I was just listening to a podcast the other day, and the woman was talking about leadership in times of stress and uncertainty, which obviously COVID brings a lot of that. And she's I don't know the technical term, but she's a nurse that administers anesthesia. And she said that is the absolute key. The interviewer asked her what her secret was, and that's what she said. She said, I have to focus on the patients. If I'm thinking about needles, and I, by the way, I love the benefits of epidurals, for example, but I hate everything about them. They're the thing that make me most queasy. My wife's had several of them, and I have to leave the room.
You looked queasy when you just said it.
So don't feel bad.
I literally thought Scott might pass out. You kind of went like a little wave emotion when you were saying it. I'm like, hang in there.
Well, this might be too graphic. We can cut it in the post, but the thing I hate is it's not the needle, which I don't like needles either. It's the fact that to administer, you're actually having to bend over so that your spine separates a little bit, and then it's by hand. It's like, and then the margin of error is so, yeah.
Oh,
anyway,
it's like,
you're about to get me fainting, so.
I just got the nails on a chalkboard or when your tooth hits the side of a pickle feeling. Oh, yes. God, so bad.
Yes.
So bad.
Anyway, such a great point though. Like put your focus on the value that you're bringing to the world, the client that you're serving. And, it's funny because Clayton and I were texting back and forth, or actually, no, I think it was somebody else. But anyway, we're talking about just how when we started this business, we stumbled into a world of fantastic marketers. And there were different types of marketers. Some marketers are of the opinion that marketing rules the day and my marketing can compensate for crappy products.
Nope.
I think there was an era where maybe that, I don't know, worked better. I don't know. But I definitely feel like, the people that get it today that have woken up they understand that this is about value creation in the world. This is about an experience that I'm creating for my clients. And I think your point is so great. Put the focus there. That's where you get the power.
Well, and I think that to add to that point, like something that's really important as well is I think sometimes people can put too much attention on like this has to be the best version it could ever be, and that keeps them from ever getting started. Like, like we're always focusing on like how can we make our product and our process and everything we do better. And that's a key part of like, what we do each and every day. But I think there's so many people that like they need more information and more study and more work and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, iteration, that is 100% correct. Like, the first iteration of something is never going to be perfect, but it shouldn't be like what you're saying, like where it's not a, at least an equal value exchange. If you really want to do well, man, it's about exchanging in abundance, above what somebody paid for. But like, if you're not exchanging at least equal value, especially with the internet, you're screwed because people will find out.
Totally.
Well, and some of the best maybe relationship building things that can happen is that interaction between a customer or a client and a provider, where they say, hey, this isn't working, and it's accepted, it's iterated on, and things get better, right? It makes for an even stronger relationship.
No, absolutely, because you're getting that customer input, right? Like, and for us, like we got some great customer input the other day, and we made a slight process change because we're like, all right, we can make it better for the people we're serving, and I feel like it's very important to have an open mind to that, but at the same time, realize the difference between helping your customer and trying to flip your business model because of a customer complaint, right? Like I think sometimes you may get people that are just unhappy people, and you can't change your business model for that. So you have to get good at knowing the difference.
It's important to scale those. I mean, one of the things I do is managing our social media. And I think it's really important. You know, I'm trying to teach everyone, don't just say it's blowing up on social. You need to come with like, what are the actual numbers? And is that, how far above average is that? You know, like I think you got to take those kind of comments out and really address, like, is this something that's a regular issue? And if it is, we need to address it. Or is this like a one-off and we need to help that customer? You know, it's a difference of those things, but so important to get like the actual facts and make sure you're relying on data, not just on a whim, because everyone hopefully is in business to want to help all their customers, but the whims can take you totally left, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, what are we doing here? You know, like this isn't even what we envisioned. So it's definitely important. I think that's a good call out.
That's a really key point though to us too, for like how Command Your Brand like manages our business. Like, because I think a lot of people too kind of manage their business by like how they're feeling today, or how much they like that person, or how much they dislike that person. Like in our company, like every single thing in our company, whether it's social media impressions, whether it's, you know, gross income for that week, whether it's, you know, client successes or client, you know, upsets, everything is statisticized. So we actually have a giant, and this is online because, you know, we don't have an office. We work out of, you know, we are virtual, but we have a giant board of graphs of each individual part of the company. So we can see like, okay, what happened there and do we need to change that? Why is this going well and what's happening here? But I think if you're not doing those sorts of things, you know, whether you're a big business or a small business, you're totally effective what's happening, and you can make the wrong move based on, you know, how upset you are, or, you know, how happy you are, or how much you like or dislike somebody.
For sure. Well, it's clear we could be talking all day long with you, Jeremy, but I'm actually really excited about the topic. We asked you to come here. We haven't even dove into that yet. So I just want to tell everyone today we wanted really Jeremy to come here and talk about some of his expertise and how businesses, entrepreneurs can compete like a big brand without spending a lot. And I am like super frugal. I get it from my mom. And I think it's one of the most important things, especially for small businesses and entrepreneurs, to understand like how they can kind of make a big splash without spending, you know, they don't have Nike dollars. So how do you make that same big splash for less money? So I'm super excited about this.
Well, so there's 4 different components to this, and I apologize if I'm a little long. I am from New Jersey, so we talk way too much, and I have a podcast. That's also a problem. But like the thing I'm going to say is a lot of business owners actually start in the wrong area, right? They're like, oh, I need marketing, I need marketing, I need marketing, I need marketing. And like here's the thing I'm going to point out to you. Like when you always need marketing, you're playing hungry hippos all day long, right? Like, and when you run out of things to feed those hippos, it's over. So like the thing you need to look at is your PR plan and your public relations plan is the thing that actually makes everything work a lot better. And small business owners, especially local business owners, are actually at a huge advantage, but they see themselves at a disadvantage. And what the actual advantage is, and I call this the small pond strategy, right? Like everybody has a small pond that they're part of. You're a big fish in a small pond somewhere. I grew up in a small town, 5/8 of a mile in size. Nothing happens there. Literally nothing. So I grew up
in a small town, and I love them. I love them. They're so great.
It's a huge advantage because when I write a press release, the local newspaper runs it without editing it. And as a small business owner, the first thing you should do is, you know, pull out a spreadsheet and make a list of all the small ponds you're in. You know, maybe your university. My universities run stories about my company. It may be the community you live in. I live in a lake community, so they have a magazine that goes around. There may be, like I said, a small newspaper. So we actually have, I don't know if you guys have this where you live, but we have a small newspaper that is sent out once a week on a Thursday to every house in my county and the 2 counties around it. So it's kind of like the what's happening in the county. Now, here's the cool thing about it. They have an online component too. So every time that you get something as a press release in that actual newspaper, it goes out to all the people in those 3 counties, and it goes on to Google News because they're considered a news source by Google News. So you're actually going to get a Google alert for that too. So that's kind of the place to start. List out all these small ponds you're a part of.
I love that advice.
It's so doable, right? It's so doable. List out all the small ponds you're a part of, and you know, you need to learn how to write a press release. There's a really good article. Just Google HubSpot press release, and HubSpot wrote a really good article on how to write a press release. Because it's really like, you need to write them like very cut and dry. Like they're not supposed to be interesting. That's how they are. But it's learn what a press release is. Also learn what things are newsworthy. Because I think people don't quite understand like what newsworthy means. So it's like Did your company achieve a stat? Did your company do something? Did your company support a cause? Are they doing something? So it has to be something that's interesting. Like when we got 50,000 downloads, that was one of the first things I talked about. And it ran in the local paper. It ran online. What part of the country are you guys in?
We're in Phoenix.
We're in Arizona.
You're in Arizona. Okay, so you guys know nothing about New Jersey. Okay, so the largest regional paper in our area is called the Bergen Record. And the editor for Fios 1 TV was reading the Bergen Record, and I had sent in a press release to NJ.com, which publishes in the Bergen Record, and there was our article. They said, oh, this would be an interesting TV story. So we got local attention in the paper, was on the internet, and then it got me on TV. So I was able to build a lot of early press this way by looking at what my small pond is.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably don't see, like they might be thinking right now, well, I don't live in a small town. But Phoenix is pretty big. And just while I was sitting here, I thought of a few small ponds for Keap that we use. We have Yes Phoenix, which is a great Facebook group where there's tons of entrepreneurs in. We've got Phoenix Startup Week. There's like small ponds within any section you're in. So don't get discouraged if you're sitting out there like, well, I'm in a big city. There's small ponds everywhere you are. You have to think of your community and your audience and find those ponds.
Well, and it's even
Jeremy, speak to our audience who, like, I think a lot of people these days they serve an online crowd, right? So what are some examples of small ponds for those who aren't in their business is not oriented to the local community?
Well, I just want to add to what Crystal said too, because that's a really, really good point. Because like when you're looking at a big city as well, Crystal, like they have neighborhoods, right? Like I know it's kind of a defunct paper now, but there used to be a paper called the Village Voice, which just served a certain part of New York City called the Village. So like you may even want to look at that, like your neighborhood may have a newspaper. So like this is a really good place to start. Now, I guess Scott, going back to what you said, I would still start with small local newspapers and small local publications. Because the actual advantage we have as online entrepreneurs is they don't understand what we do, so it's extremely interesting to them. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, and that's why I got a lot of early press for just talking about having a podcast, because people are like, what is that? So you have kind of this advantage where if people aren't aware of what you do, that local press is still going to benefit you. And like I mentioned, a lot of them have an online component, man. So like you can get in Google News, you can get in a lot of these different places. Now, the thing I would recommend as well is let's expand our spreadsheet we were working on at the beginning of this when we were talking about small ponds. If you look at a lot of places, I think there's Mind Body Green. It's a little bit of a bigger pond, but there's a lot of these like blogs that actually are going to service different industries, and they're looking for a lot of contributor content. So you can write a full article and pitch it to the site and get them to publish it. You're going to look for either editor at the website or like an info ad isn't really one you want to go to. You want to find an editor contact for that website, or somebody that writes the type of content you like and pitch it to them. But like starting out with like even blog posts in places in your niche. Like I started writing, one of the first places I started writing was influensive.com, and it's kind of right in my wheelhouse of like online entrepreneurs, millennial type influencer marketing, stuff like that. So that was like a really good place for me to start. Then I started writing for newtheory.com, gritdaily.com, and boom, I was on business.com. So it's like you can start to kind of build a lot of these components, and whether it's your in-person newspapers or it's these online publications, they're stairs, right? So like you have to figure out what the bottom stair is, and you can start climbing up. Like everybody's like, oh, I want to be in Forbes, and I want to be in Inc., and I want to be all these different things. That's cool, man. And that credibility will help you, though it's a no-follow link, so it won't help to rank your website. But you want to find out what the stairs are to getting you there. It's the smaller ones, more niche, more industry. Get more of those, start getting on some medium-sized podcasts, some smaller podcasts, and some of those are going to help you, kind of climb the stairs as well. So you want to figure out what those small media pieces are that are the bottom. If you're looking at podcasts, it's usually shows that have less than 20 episodes and less than 50 reviews, because they are a little bit newer and they're going to be easier to get on, whereas the bigger, more established ones are going to be a little bit harder. But those can even be seen as like a bottom or a middle stair on getting your steps to your bigger press, which then gives you credibility.
Love it. Great. All right. So step one, focus on PR and the connective stairs. Love it.
Yep. And I guess like adding to that too, Scott, like you want to get those things. And like I talked about, like, marketing without those things is like hungry hippos. Now the PR pieces you're creating are the things you market, right? Like I think the thing a lot of people don't get is they try to treat media and podcasts and stuff like they're a top of funnel thing, like they're a lead gen. And they can be, if it's a really big show, but also at the same time, when you're looking at your marketing funnel, it could be something towards the middle of your funnel, which then gives you more credibility and helps people to convert. It could be something that you use to your current audience to show them like, hey, you have the credibility that you have to want to work with you. So once you create these PR pieces, they're things that you then use in your marketing to make your marketing work better. One of the things I like to do as well is a lot of retargeting with a lot of these PR pieces. And I can't take total credit for this. I got to give a shout out to Dennis Yu from Blitz Metrics that taught me how to do this. But like one of the things he'll do is he calls it the $1 a day ad strategy. And you take a lot of these PR pieces you've gotten and you put a retargeting pixel on your website and you create 30, 60, and 90-day audiences, and you run a budget of $1 a day retargeting these PR pieces at the people that have been to your website. So these are people that know who you are, and this is the credibility they need to continue the journey. So your PR and your marketing should work together. You can't just have one.
Definitely.
Love that. Yeah, the psychology of, I mean, we all experience it, but the psychology of seeing somebody who's getting, just the fact that somebody's getting press immediately, creates credibility, right? Creates evidence that helps us to understand and build trust. So I love that you pointed out the interplay between PR and then the ways you can use it in the rest of your marketing. Fantastic.
And it's an active thing too, because I think a lot of people have this misconception. Well, I know a lot of people have this misconception because they've said it to me. I'll just wait until my business is so successful that the media finds me. They're not looking. It's a 24-hour news cycle where
right.
There's so much going on and there's so many options. You got to be out there willing to tell your story, willing to pitch it, and willing to get it in front of the right people. So if you're not going to actively...
If they find you, it's not the story you want them to be.
That's for sure. Probably, right? That is for sure. If they find
what
you...
Scott did?
If they find you, it's something you wish got swept under the rug.
Exactly.
I think one other thing to pile here on PR too before we move on. I think, sure. I think that, this is part of our mission at Keap is to help make starting a business be as admirable as, maybe the idea of being a doctor or a lawyer, that has kind of this clout to it. And I think that in a lot of ways, local media, they're tuned into the power of small business yep. and the power of entrepreneurship, right? And so I think it's a really exciting season. PR, when some people hear that, they might think, isn't that kind of the olden days? I love that you're orienting us back to that, because not only is it a season, like you said, there are small ponds people can tap into and get great results.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Well, I think it's so true, because it's like I said, it's if PR and marketing don't work together, you're just playing hungry hippos, man. And like when you're finding your small pond, it is attainable. And that's kind of the thing you have to understand. Like if you find something small, it's easier to get and you build up from there. And I think, whether you're a small business, medium-sized business, whatever you are, if you learn how to get media the right way, man, you can really cut the learning curve.
For sure. I agree with that. I think PR is, when some small businesses hear PR, they think that's only for big brands. So yeah. I like that we're talking about this in the sense of using that to compete with the big brands, because it is something small businesses should be doing. Now, how much time might be different. That might look different. But I think finding those really key areas you want to be known in your community or your audience for is like crucial to getting more customers and getting new leads and a new audience. It's one of the reasons we wanted to do this podcast was just anytime you can get in front of a new audience, you're going to get new opportunities. So I think it's critical. But that being said, like, what kind of advice would you give to an entrepreneur or a small business owner to really like manage that space? Like they have lots of hats on. What kind of emphasis should they put there? Like in 100% effort, what kind of effort level should they be using for their PR?
So early on, I put like 80% of my effort on PR because I kind of knew it was important to kind of break through and get known. Like, because if you don't get known, there is no survival, right? Like you have to get known in order to survive. So I put about 80% of the effort on that. Now the thing I did is, because I feel like getting started and kind of getting that first hire, whatever it may be, is really hard for a lot of small businesses. Like you said, you're wearing a lot of small hats. So I kind of figured out what things I could outsource to virtual assistants in the beginning, and that allowed me to hire a lot more US-based staff. But that was like one of the areas I started. Like there's a site called Help a Reporter. It's called Haro. Are you guys familiar with it?
Yep.
And one of the things you can do with that is if you have responses you're giving to a Haro, which is, reporters basically say, this is a story I'm writing, looking for a source about, blah, blah, blah. So what you can do is keep a file of, maybe some you've answered yourself, and then you can have a virtual assistant start to respond to some of those for you to kind of help you get those pieces. And when they come back in, you answer them yourself. So you want to figure out like what some of these areas are where you can use somebody that's a virtual assistant to help you. And, like I said, that allowed us to get to a revenue point that we could start hiring, US-based staff. So I would honestly start looking at some of those like smaller, lower energy things. And, like you can get somebody to take like interviews you've done and turn them into words and stuff like that and dictate them, whatever it may be. So like you want to find areas where you can use a virtual assistant to help you early on. And like I said, you need to spend a lot of your time on PR early on and get creative with that too. Like I know, one of the things we've done is a lot of community outreach. Like, we're very anti-drug, so we do a lot of stuff against, drug education and stuff like that. We're doing a lot of that because that's also PR in a different way. And it's because we want to help and we want to support people, but that's also another PR action. So you have to figure out what creative things you can do that either A, are, cheap to do, which is, having a VA help you with some of these things. Number two, that don't require a ton of energy and that also align with your purpose. So I think that's really, really, really important.
So I'd love to hear any other thoughts you've got too. And we didn't give you really space to talk about Command Your Brand. So maybe tell people what you do there. And then what other thoughts do you have in this vein about small brands competing like big brands?
So at Command Your Brand, we are a PR firm that helps people get their story down because how you tell your story is vital. So we actually coach people through a process on how to do that.
An actual story, got it.
Yeah, we help them, get that down. Then we actually pitch them to podcasts, help them get set on those shows, and then we also teach them how to repurpose all the content they're creating. So, that's really what we do because we know it's vital and we know how much podcasting and a lot of that has really, changed my life. In terms of other things in competing like a big brand, it's a lot of retargeting ads, man. Like I know for us, we've seen a ton of success with very, very cheap Google ads and like, we didn't even get like complicated. We used Google Smart Ads where Google like decides for you. So like you can do it a lot of really cheap, easy ways if you look for that blue ocean, man. But I think a lot of people, they're all kind of fighting over the same areas. And we found out there weren't people looking for our keywords. So, we've put a decent low budget to Google Ads. So I would start to look at, what are your small ponds? What are the blue oceans you're a part of? Like, don't keep fighting over the same piece of meat everybody else is. And, like, what can you use a low budget? Retargeting ads, meaning you are targeting ads that people that have already been to your website are so affordable because you don't have to spend much because it's already people that have been to your site. And one other thing to that I would also recommend as well is there is a program we use on our site called getemails.com. And they have a massive database of people that have opted into email lists. And because sometimes companies, yes, do share your information. And they can turn about 30% of your anonymous traffic into email opt-ins that are like totally legit, totally cool, whatever it may be. So you're also still retargeting people that have already been to your site. I find the best traffic is people that have already seen you.
Got it. So one follow-up question I want to have, since you obviously have a successful podcast, and it sounds like in many cases you're working to get your clients on podcasts. What are your thoughts to our listeners, maybe who've thought about the idea of a podcast, may feel intimidated? I think your points earlier were great that the podcast can fit. It may not be immediately out of the gate the best top of funnel strategy, but it sort of fits in the marketing funnel. So what are your thoughts there, and what's kind of your general advice to entrepreneurs who are thinking about a podcast?
So I would say first off, like, if you don't have a different message and if you don't have something that makes you really different and unique, it may not be the best time to start one now until you're really developed in that. Because, hats off to him. John Lee Dumas has done a great job with Entrepreneur on Fire, but there are like 250,000 people that have tried to copy that model and like try to just make the exact same show. And it's like, come on, dude. Like, so like if you don't have a different and unique message, it maybe you may want to wait a little bit until you kind of have that patterned out. The other thing I would say is I think, and there's a South Park episode I got this from, but it's called it's the episode where they talk about the magical internet money, where they think they get a video online and everybody becomes a millionaire. And I think people have that misconception about podcasts. They think that, they start a podcast and they just have like, Joe Rogan advertising money rolling in and stuff like that. And the thing I would tell people is there's going to be 0.5% of people that do that. The thing you need to realize is how your podcast can support your business, whether that's through networking, whether that's through, joint ventures of some kind, whether that's through using it as the main PR vehicle like I have for your company. So you have to realize how your podcast fits in your strategy. Don't have it be the thing that you think is going to be the monetizing vehicle in itself. For most people, it's just not going to be that way.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for being with us today. I think you've given some great advice, just your general advice in working with so many successful people on your podcast, as well as the specific advice to find your small pond, get really clear about your story, and leverage that story in a way to get your name out there, and then use retargeting to reinforce that. Awesome. Any final thoughts you want to squeeze out before we close up today?
Yes. If I could tell people to do one thing, it would be read the book by Cal Newport called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And I think, I'm 33, so I'm kind of on the edge of this millennial generation, where the problem with my generation is everybody thinks that the heavens need to open up and they're going to have a purpose. And Cal says that, kind of knowing that out of the box, like, you can't. So you find something you're really good at, and whether that's what you do in your business now or something that's part of your business, you focus on that so you get really, really, really good at that, and it becomes effortless, and that's where the passion comes in. Like, don't follow your passion, get good at something until you become passionate.
Love that. All right, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. Great advice. So help our listeners know how they can find you.
Absolutely. I know we've talked a lot about PR and a lot about getting attention. And, if people are interested in the 7 reasons they're not getting booked on their favorite podcasts, I actually put together a really good piece on that's going to help them do that. And it's over at commandyourbrand.com/7 reasons. And the word 7 or the number 7 will work for that.
Awesome.
Great.
I will say you must be good at that, because I don't, typically we're inviting the guests on that someone knows or we've met somewhere, and we get the request sometimes to come on. And I think it was a great email that made me feel like you'd be a great fit. So thank you for the great conversation today. And we're so glad you were joining us with lots of great insight. And I'm definitely going to have to check out that episode with the most interesting man, because now I'm more interested than ever. Like, no joke.
He really is interesting, and he wrote a book about his life. I think it's called Stay Interesting. So anyway,
that's
nice.
I'm
that's
in.
Very appropriate.
I'm in.
Crystal's already selling past the culture, Crystal. All right. Well, thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Jeremy, Ryan Slate. We're going to call this a wrap for this episode of Small Biz Buzz.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Small Biz Buzz. Please take a second to subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star rating. It helps keep the show going. And if you need a hand with growing your small business, head over to Keap.com. That's Keap.com and get started. More business, less work. That's Keap.